up to the 30, the 20, 10, 5, Torrey Horton back to the end zone.
48-yard play. Guess who? Body up the middle, making another move to the outside. 15, 10, end zone again.
Keeps it. Nice move by Brown. He's got space. He's got 6. 35-yard touchdown for Byron Brown. A record-setting night for the South Florida quarterback.
Down so far, a little bit of a high snap. Genty right up the middle. Genty has room. Ashton Genty, give him 6.
Second and long. Lagar tries to fit it in. Rose, it does. Rose stays up. The Suns offense 4-3 wheels. Incredible effort for Rose.
The G5 Hive. All G5, all the time.
Welcome to the G5 Hive Live. We are excited to bring you the G5 college football coverage you love each and every week. I am Luke. Always get my fingers mixed up. I am joined by my co-host, Justice. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're like Eric Froton, who got here early, actually right on time, we just started a little bit late, thanks to me. Make sure you go out and you comment. We'll try to get to everybody's comments as the show goes on. If you have something, please ask. We'll get it out there. And if you're watching us on X, please give us a follow, a like, a retweet. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Justin and I have some big news. We talked about it a little bit last week, but it is a pinned tweet on our X. Justice, do you want to talk a little bit about this before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, our merch store is now available live. I will put the link in the comments. I literally just got the word probably 5 minutes ago from the provider that it's available. So yeah, if you want to support us, the best ways to support the work that we do here is number one, go to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, and number two, visit the merch store, get yourself some sweet gear. We got shirts, long sleeve, short sleeve, performance shirts, fleeces, hoodies, all the above. So yeah, visit the merch store. The link is in the video comments on YouTube. It's also pinned to our Twitter page, X page, whatever you want to call it. It's a twin. It's pinned to the top there, so you can find the link there. So yeah, super excited about that.
All right. Now let's get into our 2020 guys here for week 8. Quarterbacks. Again, these are the top 20 in pass attempts and the top 20 in passing yardage. So if you meet both of those criteria, you are in this list. And then I ranked these amongst who do I have kind of the most confidence in based off the numbers. And then, there might be some guys that are in here that maybe just don't have that touchdown luck, but are still playing really well. Or maybe are playing sneakily well that you may be down on them and they're doing well. So here I got Chandler Morris, North Texas. He has the most passing yards per game in the G5 with 348. He's got the most touchdowns in the G5 with 23 and the most big-time throws in the G5 with 19. Number 2, Spencer Petras, Utah State. Second most passing yards per game in the G5 with 326.2 and the most completions per game in the G5 with 27. I live here in Iowa. I never saw any of this. Kirk, what are we doing? Petras just throwing the ball around the yard. Number 3, Seth Hennigan, Memphis. He's second in the G5 in pass attempts. Devin Dampier at number 4, New Mexico, tied for the least amount of completions per game of these 2020 guys with 20. But he leads the 2020 guys in rushing attempts per game with 10 and rushing yards with 70. He's got an 11.2 ADOT, which leads the 2020 guys, and second in big-time throws in the G5 with 18. Again, another reason why I like the Lobos this week. Number 5, this is a sneaky guy. He's been on here all season. Joey Aguilar, App State, 3rd in the G5 in pass attempts, 3rd most passing yards per game in the G5 with 291. However, he's got the most turnover-worthy plays of the 2020 guys with 14. 3rd in the G5, I believe. Number 6, Jordan McLeod, Texas State. He's got the 2nd most touchdowns in the G5 with 20. That's kind of been a little bit under the radar, I think, from this. You maybe thought he would pop off and have this huge year like he did at JMU last year. But yeah, 2nd in touchdowns with 20. And like I mentioned earlier with Chandler Morris, he's at 23. So only 3 behind him. Number 7, I decided to add Jalen Kitna. He was on there last week, but it was only 2 games. Now we got a 3-game sample size. We're not sure with Zeno, if he's going to come back after the bye or not. So I at least want you guys to be aware of Jalen Kitna. Yes, son of John Kitna, Lions quarterback. He's there at UAB, transfer from Florida, I believe. He leads the G5 in pass attempts per game with 45. A 3-game sample size, but he's tossing the ball around the yard. He's got the 3rd most completions per game in the G5 with 26. But he's tied for the lowest ADOT of the 2020 guys with 7.3. Number 8, Temple quarterback Evan Simon. He's got the least amount of pass attempts per game of the 2020 guys with 31.5 per game, tied for the least amount of completions per game of the 2020 guys with 20, and the least amount of turnover-worthy plays of the 2020 guys with 4. So he just meets that threshold. But when I look at these other guys, hey, I feel pretty good. He's a game manager, gets the job done. He's been, didn't start off as a starter, but worked his way in there. Was hurt last 2 weeks ago and then came back. So Evan Simon, a name to know. And then he's been on there every week these last 2. Mikey Keene, Fresno State. Braden Shager, Hawaii. New to the list this week is Owen McCowan, UTSA. They threw the ball around quite a bit the last couple weeks. EJ Warner back on the list. I think he was there for a couple weeks at the beginning with Rice. He's got the least amount of pass yards per game of these 2020 guys with 224, and he's tied for the lowest ADOT of the 2020 guys with 7.3, tied with Jalen Kitna. And then Nicholas Vadiato, Middle Tennessee, is the least amount of touchdowns of the SUG group with 7 amongst those 2020 guys. So we will see if maybe these bottom 8, I guess maybe the bottom 3 there, we'll see if they're able to hold on for next week. Running backs, everyone that I'm going to talk about here is on this list is at 91 yards per game or more with at least 16 opportunities per game. You've got Ashton Genty at Boise State, crushing it. What's there to talk about? Marquez Cooper at number 2, San Diego State. He leads the G5 in touches per game with 26. Makai Hughes been having a great year for Tulane. I think earlier this in our G5 Worker Bee series, they said if we can get him 2,000 yards rushing, they will. He's gonna run the ball a lot. Mario Anderson at Memphis. He's got the least amount of rushes of the 2020 guys with 14, but he's the 2nd most receptions per game in the G5 with 4, and the 2nd in the G5 in touchdowns with 12, Genty leading the way with 17. So Mario Anderson there at number 4. Avery Morrow, Colorado State. At 6, I skipped number 5 because I'm bad at math, I guess. Braden Sloan, Ball State. He's got the least amount of rush yards of those 2020 guys with 63, but he's doing a lot of his stuff through the air. Like I said, number 6, Avery Morrow. Number 7, Rasul Faison, Utah State. Number 8, Dean Connors Rice, 66 rush yards per game, which is the 2nd least of the 2020 guys, but he has the most receptions per game in the G5 with 5, just leading the aforementioned Mario Anderson. Ahmad Hardy, they had a bye for Louisiana. He's coming back this week. I got it somewhere. I wanted to shout out somebody. Maybe I don't have it anymore. Got this. He was our freshman of the week a couple weeks back, and a photographer posted this picture, so I wanted to put that in there, put a new picture in there, and give him a shout out. But I have lost my shout out, so sorry about that. Ahmad Hardy, he's doing all of his damage on the ground. He's only getting half a reception per game, so like he's just not being utilized there. And honestly, like a lot of these guys here at this back half, 9 through 14, aren't doing a lot in the air. So Quentin Cooley, Liberty, number 10, he's got the least touches per game of these 2020 guys with 16, third most rushing yards per game of the 2020 guys, and 0 receptions per game. Anthony Tyus, number 11. This will probably be his last week there, given that he's injured and will be out for a while. So we'll see how that goes. Ontario Brown, NIU, missed a game. He's back, got eased into it. He's tied for the least amount of touchdowns of this 2020 guys with 2. Ishmael Mahdi, Texas State, he's tied for the least amount of touchdowns of these 2020 guys, also with 2. And then Terrion Stewart, Bowling Green, least amount of total yards of the 2020 guys with 91.6, and also does not give you anything in the receiving game at 0 receptions per game. Wide receivers, Nash, Ashlock, Royals, Robinson, and Wysong, they're all with double-digit targets per game. All of these guys here are averaging 74 or more yards per game. You got Nick Nash, San Jose State, averaging 10.3 receptions per game, 129 yards per game, and leads the G5 in touchdowns with 11. Jalen Royals at number 2, 119 yards per game. Third lowest ADOT of the 2020 guys with 9.3. That's still pretty good, if you ask me. Ricky White comes in at number 3, tied for second in the G5 in touchdowns with 9. Like we said earlier, Haj Malik Williams has buoyed him up there as the season's gone along. Luke Wysong, New Mexico, second to last of the 2020 guys in touchdowns with 1, but he's doing great in the nation in receiving yards and then targets. So again, one of those guys not getting a lot of touchdowns. If he has a multi-touchdown game, like it's there. We could have a big breakout Luke Wysong party. Another guy who could have a big breakout. His quarterback's on the list, but it's number 5, Caden Robinson, App State. He's the last of the 2020 guys in touchdowns with 0. Still searching for that first touchdown of the year. Pofile Ashlock, Hawaii, second lowest ADOT of the 2020 guys with 8.9. Devontae Ross at Troy comes in at number 7. Krishan McCray at Kent State. He's averaging only 4 receptions per game, but he's getting you those home runs. Omari Kelly at Middle Tennessee at number 9. Number 10, Ted Hurst, Georgia State. He's got the least amount of targets of the 2020 guys with 8. Least amount of yards per game with 74. However, he's giving you the highest ADOT of the 2020 guys with 18.8. He's got a 3.6 yak per receptions or yard after catch per reception, which is the least of the 2020 guys. We'll see if, again, monitor what that quarterback situation is there. And then DT Sheffield with his big game for North Texas. He's now tied for second in the G5 in touchdowns with 9. Lowest ADOT of the 2020 guys with 6.2, and the yak per reception of 9.6, which leads the 2020 guys. Tight ends. Not a lot of difference. It's the same group as last week. Again, I did a bad job of talking about the wide receivers and running backs, but the tight ends, again, if you're top 20 in targets and you're top 20 in receiving yards, so retrospect, go back, talk about the running backs. If they're top 20 in total touches, top 20 in total yardage, you make that list. If you're top 20 in both. Wide receivers lead in targets, lead in receiving yards per game. You made that list. And then, here in tight ends, same 5 as last week. We've got Harold Fanon, Jr. Bowling Green. He's giving you averaging 10 targets, 8 receptions, 124 yards, and he has 5 touchdowns on the season. Tanner Kozel, Ball State, he's averaging 9 targets, 7 receptions, 71 yards per game, and he's got 4 touchdowns on the season. Holden Willis, Middle Tennessee State, he's averaging 7 targets, 4 receptions, 69 yards on this per game, 2 touchdowns on the season. Dorian Fleming, Georgia State, 7 targets, 4 receptions, 51 yards. He has 2 touchdowns on the season. Do we see maybe even an uptick for him if we have a quarterback change? That would be something.
Yeah, he seemed to get targeted He did seem to get targeted more when Gibson was in the game.
And then Terrence Carter, Louisiana, 5 targets, 4 receptions, averaging 66 yards per game. He's got 4 touchdowns on the season. Like I said, he had a huge game this last week with whatever it was, 127, 129 yards.
Yeah. I think Gibson is good for Dorian Fleming, bad for Ted Hurst, and then the reverse is true. I don't think Gibson has quite the arm or trust his arm quite like Veyer. Just throw those deep shots to Ted Hurst. So he seems to be looking more towards Dorian Fleming pretty consistently, and then in the game this past week. But Harold Fana Jr., man, like what a year, right? Like he'd be a top 3 if you put him in the receivers. He'd be top 3. Just incredible year by Harold Fana Jr.
Absolutely. All right, what do we got for defensive guys here, Justice?
All right, so for the defensive ends or edge, as some people call them, because sometimes they're outside linebackers. Number 1, the only guy that's been on this list each and every week, Mike Green, havoc rate of 16.2%. He has a rush win rate of 16.5%. Just impressive season there for Mike Green. Number 2, defensive end Bradley Weaver from Ohio, havoc rate of 15.6%. He ranks 3rd in total quarterback pressures with 27. Newcomer to the list this week, outside linebacker / edge, Charles Rosser, Bowling Green, havoc rate of 14.7%. He ranks 1st among the defensive end or edges in tackles per game with 5. Next up, defensive end Brian Ugwu, Miami of Ohio, havoc rate of 14.6%, ranks 2nd among defensive end and tackles for loss with 6 tackles for loss. And then the sack leader in G5, number 5, Trey White, defensive end, San Diego State, havoc rate of 14.3%. And as I said, ranks 1st in sacks with 11. It's an incredible season there for Trey White and the Aztecs. Moving over to defensive tackles, number 1 is defensive tackle Anthony Hawkins, Bowling Green, havoc rate of 10.4%. He ranks 3rd among defensive tackles in sacks with 4. Number 2, Darius Alexander, Toledo, havoc rate of 9.9%. He ranks 3rd in quarterback pressures among defensive tackles at 14. Number 3, defensive tackle Chris Fitzgerald, James Madison, havoc rate of 9.6%, has 15 stops. Those are stops on 3rd and 4th down. So great season there for Chris Fitzgerald. Number 4, defensive tackle Soani Toa, San Jose State, havoc rate of 9.6%, has a rush win rate of 11.1%, which is tops among defensive tackles. And rounding out the top 5 is defensive tackle Deonta Johnson, East Carolina, also a havoc rate of 9.6%. And he ranks 1st among defensive tackles in tackles for loss with 5. Moving over to the linebackers, we do have one newcomer this week, but the top 4 have been the same for the last couple weeks. Linebacker Sean Dolak, Buffalo, 12.0 tackles per game. He leads all linebackers in stops with 47. Stops are stopping the opposing offense on 3rd and 4th down. Number 2, linebacker Travion Barnes, Florida International. You get to see in action later tonight or tomorrow, depending on where you're watching this. 11 tackles per game. He has 9 total quarterback pressures on the season. Number 3, Colin Ramos, Navy, 10.83 tackles per game. Has a solo tackle rate of 74%, which is pretty incredible. Number 4, Sean Dolak's teammate, who actually had more tackles than him this week, Red Murdoch of Buffalo, 10.71 tackles per game. He has 6 tackles for loss on the season. And new to the top 5, Jaden Yates from the Marshall Thundering Herd, 9.43 tackles per game. And he has a very low missed tackle rate of only 12%. Moving over to the cornerbacks. Got a lot of new faces this week. The top 2 are new. Number 1, cornerback Jaden Mays from Army, an adjusted net yards against per coverage snap of a negative 0.353 and has a quarterback rating against of 2.80. Great season there for Jaden. Number 2, had a huge week this week. Deshaun Peel from Navy, an adjusted net yards against per coverage snap of negative 0.261. He ranks second in the G5 cornerbacks among interceptions with 3. Number 3, cornerback Dante Joyner, Arkansas State, an adjusted net yards against of 0.109. He ranks 7th in interceptions with 2. Number 4, this guy had been number 1 the last couple weeks, but didn't have such a great week this week. Cornerback Terrence Spence, James Madison, adjusted net yards against of 0.127. He ranks first among cornerbacks interceptions with 4. And rounding out the top 5, having a great season, cornerback Torrey Richardson from Temple, an adjusted net yards against of 0.150 and has a quarterback rating against of 29.5. Moving over to the safeties, these guys, same as the cornerbacks, are ranked according to adjusted net yards against per coverage snap. Number 1 in the G5 and number 1 in all college football. Jerron Manning, Old Dominion, adjusted net yards against of negative 0.616. He ranks second in interceptions with 3, and he's averaging 6.71 tackles per game. Number 2, safety Jacob Thomas, James Madison, adjusted net yards against of negative 0.454 and has a QB rating against of 7.6. Number 3, safety Zechariah Poyser, Jacksonville State, adjusted net yard against of negative 0.410 and ranks second in interceptions with 3, averaging 5.67 tackles per game. Number 4, Tyree Skipper, Louisiana, adjusted net yards against of negative 0.237. And he ranks second in interceptions with 3. And a newcomer to the list this week, safety DeMarco Williams, Western Kentucky, adjusted net yards against of negative 0.186 and has a quarterback rating against of 12. And that's going to round out our G5 Hive 2020 players. These are the top players at each position amongst the G5.
All right, come back and join us next week as we discuss what happened in Week 9, as well as look forward to Week 10 of the 2024 season. And as always, bring you up to date on all the latest news and happenings in the world of G5 college football. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on X, please give us a retweet, a like, and a follow. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe and leave those 5-star ratings and reviews. Remember, we've got our new merch line out there. If you want to support us, go ahead and make a purchase there. Justice dropped the link here in the chat.
The link's in the YouTube comments, and it's on it's pinned on our X page.
All right, and with that, we thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.